So first of all, I have to make amends for last week. I did not prepare. Because I did not prepare, I thought I knew what the mimer was about, and I didn't. So the Shabbos, I fixed it. I taught the mimer again, this time the correct way. So hopefully I'll, you know what, let's dedicate just today to fix last week's mimer. Okay.
No sweat. What page is it?
Page 14. I didn't do the legwork, and the legwork is always opening up the back and seeing their very important notes. And the note for this mimer in the back is Lichlalut ma'amar ze re'eh דיבור המתחיל כל המעריך באחד, מאמרי אדום הרזקן על מאמרי רז"ל, עמוד כ"ב ואילך. So the Alter Rebbe has, there's a book that was found that had Maimarim, just general Maimarim on Chazal. And there the Maimar is on Kol HaMa'arich Be'echad Ma'arichim Yamav V'Shnotav. That a person who says Echad in Shema in length receives a long life. Or has it like Avram Zaken Baba Yamim, that all his days were long. So what does this have anything to do with the pasuk that we read from Bereshis? Yaval Yavi Yoshev Oel Mikne. The Yaval was the father of all those who dwell in tents and have cattle. Yoshem Achiv Yuval Yavi Kotofes Kino V'Ugav. And the name of his brother Yuval, he was the father of all those who played musical instruments. I guess call it a lyre or a violin. It's not really a violin. V'Ugav, and some kind of wind instrument. So the connection is, and this is something you can't pick up because this is such an abbreviated form of the original mimer that it's almost impossible to pick it up. We sort of picked up pieces of it, but not the main idea. That he said here that you needed both bittul and a bracha. That you needed both some kind of nullification and some kind of blessing in order to elevate to a higher state. So really what he means is he means two levels of bittul. That's how it comes out in the longer mimer. And when you think about it, it's a very simple idea that in Chabad usually we talk about two different types of bittul. Bittul yesh and bittul b'metzius, or the nullification of one's feeling of self and the nullification of one's actual self, or nullification of one's being, totally nullifying one's being. What's the difference? So the easiest way that it came out on Shabbos was to explain it when you go to daven. When you go to daven, actually coming to shul on time and being in a minyan, that's bitul yesh. That's nullifying your yesh. Why? Because your yesh, yourself, your feeling of self says, I'd rather do other things. I'd rather read the newspaper, I'd rather sleep, I'd rather this, I'd rather that. And you nullify that. And so you go and you do what Hashem told you to do, or what Chazal told you to do. It's very nice. But that's not the end of it. There has to be another level of bittul, which here it sounds like he's calling it bracha. And it's similar. It's what's going on. We'll explain it more in depth later. But it's really a second type of bittul. The second type of bittul is that you have to get, in the end, a feeling of, the only English word that I know that comes close is rapture. You have to have a feeling that you are completely immersed, completely gone from being, and completely nullified in the act that you're doing. One of the names this has is pleasure. And in the Mimer he calls it's pleasure. So he says, here's the other example. The other example is procreation. The commandment to procreate is an act of bittul yesh. Not mitzias yet. Just bittul yesh. Why? Because I want to go to sleep. But my wife wants something else. So I said, what can I do? Why am I here? So if he's a fake man, so he says, I'm here to get pleasure. But if he's a real man, what does he say according to Torah? That you have a commitment you have an obligation to provide your wife with certain things. So one of these things is procreation. So he says, I'd rather go to sleep, I'd rather go do something else, whatever I have. Again, 20-year-olds maybe don't get it. But 40 and 50 and 60-year-olds get it. So you have other things you'd rather do. It's not the first thing on your list. But this is what I need to do. Okay, that's very nice. So you came and you did what you're supposed to do. You're a real man. Very nice. But who's getting the pleasure? Good. So in procreation, the male always gets pleasure. There's always a sense of rapture. There's always a sense of losing yourself at some moment. He says that is what's needed in order to procreate, meaning otherwise it's just intercourse. It's not procreation. Otherwise, if you're just seeking the pleasure itself, there's no bittul hayesh in the beginning. There's no getting over your momentary needs, wants, whatever it is, and doing it because it's a mitzvah. So that's one way that it's lacking, and it's just intercourse. Or, meaning you're just seeking your pleasure. Or if you're only doing it from the point of view of it's a mitzvah, and there's no pleasure in it, there's no rapture, there's no feeling of losing the self, then the second type of bittul is missing. Bittul b'mitzius. So again, the male would say, I would think that I always get pleasure. I always get the second type of pleasure. This is not that simple. The real type of pleasure that you're supposed to do is of the form of the first type of pleasure. What was the first type of pleasure? The first type of bittul. The first type of bittul was that I'm mevatel myself. So the pleasure. So the second type of bittul has to be of the same form. So he says, really, when is it procreation and not just intercourse? When your point is to give pleasure to your wife and not to yourself. Unbelievable thing. He says that's when it, and then he says that that's what Chazal meant when they said that ish mazriat tchila yoledet nekeva, veisha mazriat tchila yoledet zachar. Which doesn't make sense a little, because what was their picture, the philosophical picture of intercourse, of procreation? They thought that the male has a seed and the female has a seed, which is true. We don't call them seeds today. We call them an ovum and a sperm. And they said, depending on who gets the second type of bittul, not the first type. When they say mazriya, they mean who is getting to the point of like putting the seed into the ground. Who is the one who put it into the ground? Who is the one who caused the bittul? Because the seed in the ground, it disintegrates. What do we call that word? Nirkav. How do we say that?
Rots.
It rots. So that rotting is the rotting of the self. Really, that's what it is. Who here lost himself first? If the woman lost herself, she will give birth to a male. Why? Because she's in bittul. So who's still here? Who is here? Who is present? The male. If the woman reached bittul because of the pleasure, the second type of bittul, then what remains is the male phenomenon, because he's still there. So because of that, she gives birth to a male, meaning that what he's giving is still intact. But if he reaches his pleasure first, so what did he do to his seed, as it were? It disappeared. So what is she going to give birth to? What remains, which is her seed. That was their thinking. You following? You look like you're in shock.
No, I'm listening very carefully.
In shock. This is shocking, no? It's shocking because it's a statement from Chazal that everybody ridicules. Today they ridicule it. They say, what are you talking about? There's no such thing. But he's not talking. But he says Chazal are not talking about the physical mechanism ever. They're almost never talking about the physical mechanism. They don't really care. Is it this? They're talking about the essence of the point. How in physical it happens, we don't know why. Today we say that there's a male sperm and a female sperm, right? An X or a Y, and we don't know why one catches and the other doesn't. We don't know what the mechanism is. We have no idea why this sperm makes it first and that sperm makes it last. We don't know. So the mechanism is not important. The point is what happened during the procreation. So let's take it back to going to shul. So if you go to shul, it's not enough to come. Somebody has to get pleasure here. So who's getting pleasure? Am I getting pleasure from the davening, or is Hashem getting pleasure from the davening? Somebody has to have the second level of bittul. How is it in korbanos, which is the example that he gives here? That bringing the korban, bringing the sacrifice itself, that's the act of bittul yesh. Because I'd rather do something else right now. Okay? What is causing the second level of bittul, the pleasure? The shira of the Levim, the song of the Levim, which elevates both the one hearing it, meaning me bringing the korban, and the Shem, it says. Because this is something I didn't think about before, but the Levim, why are they so poor? They were always the poorest tribe in Am Yisrael. Why? Because the Kohanim, they come twice a year to the Beis HaMikdash. They stock up on meat, or they eat a lot. They stock up in their bellies, but they get all the trimmings. They get the leather, the hides. They became very rich from it. That's why the whole problem in Bais Shemi with the tzdukim. The tzdukim were Kohanim because they were corrupt. And they used to stock the meat. They didn't just eat it when they were supposed to. They used to take it and sell it. So theoretically, there's all kinds of heteron that they found. But in general, they did things they weren't supposed to do. But they became very corrupt. And they became very wealthy. Because they used to say, well, if you want to bring this kind of a korban, you have to pay me to be the first on the right. Like every bureaucracy. If you want to get first in line, you don't want to wait all day in the Beis HaMikdash to give one korban. So you have to come to me. Anyways, the Kohanim got very rich, but the Levim, what do they get for their work? What do? They come to sing. They come to play their musical instruments. They come to open and close the gates. What do they get for it? Nothing. Nothing. They come mamish voluntarily. So the Levi, he's always in a state of bittul. That's the source of the pasuk. That's what the pasuk Va'avad Levihu means. That the Levi is always in a state of looking at Hashem's Reisha De'ayin, it's called. Who there is Reisha De'ayin? It's the pleasure. So he's always in touch with what causes Hashem pleasure. So going back to me coming to shul. So I came to shul, it's very nice. And now the question is, who's going to make a second level of bittul here? So the second level of bittul is either I get pleasure from davening, so that's very good, at least that. Or Hashem will get pleasure from my davening. If I get pleasure from my davening, Hashem will do what He wants. That's like ish mazriat chila yoledet nekeva. I'm like the male here. I'm the guy who gets the pleasure here. So it's done in the image of the other one. So Hashem will do something, but He'll do what He wants. If I want to get Hashem to do what I want, like the woman giving birth to somebody in my image, that's male, I have to make sure that he gets the pleasure from it, and not me. So that's what this mimer is about. Except, go figure. So now he says, so that's the first part of the mimer. He's talking about two types of bittul, and then he's got this first level of bittul and second level of bittul. And in the mimer in Mamrei Razal, he brings many examples that are two levels of bittul in many places in Torah and in the Gemara. So for instance, Eliezer went to find Rivka. V'inei ish mishta'eh macharish la. He says mishta'eh is the first level of bittul. Macharish la is the second level of bittul. What's the sign? The mishta'eh la. That he wants her to be his image for what is relevant to Yitzchak. What would be a good match for Yitzchak? So he's macharish la. That's like the giving her pleasure. How is it that he's giving her pleasure? Mishta'eh is he's waiting. He'd rather go look, right? Avram sent him to go look for a bride. So what does he do? He sits by the well and he waits. So that's very difficult to do. That's bitul yesh. Because what would he rather do? Go to the shadchan, go find somebody, go to Lavan's family, go to Betul's family, go find her. So he sits there by the well waiting. That's his bitul yesh. Macharish la is he already sees Rivka. He sees somebody here that's starting to answer what he needs. But macharish la, he's silent when he sees her working. He says, "I'm not going to get involved. Give her the pleasure of watering my camels and giving me water and telling me that you're welcome to stay with us and so on." It's an amazing thing. And so then she's born. It says like that. At that moment, she was born again. She was born as Yitzchak's wife. Before that, she wasn't worthy. But he made her into Yitzchak's wife through that process. So that's what he means, that when you want to go from one level to the next, there have to be two levels of bittul. The first level of bittul is that I come and nullify my feeling of self, that I come and do something that I wouldn't necessarily want to do and willing to do it. And the second level is that there has to be pleasure from it. Pleasure is just the example that he gives, I think. I think there are other options of bittul b'mitzius.
I mean, in general, the concept is that Chachma and Bina need to work together. So when you talk about Bittul Ayesh, is really, I think, connected more with Bina. And you're talking about Bittul B'Mitzios is really more a Chachma level. So we talk about Oneg typically is more of a Chachma type of...
So Dafka Ba'avad Alevihu is from Bina.
Well, it's always a question of movement.
That's one option.
So when you're talking about the unity of Chachma and Bina is what's going to go and give birth.
Is that okay? That's one way.
So you need so for Hiskalus you need to have Hiskalus of both.
So he has a similar mimer when he's talking about Yosef and his brothers. So he says that Yosef and his brothers also have this relationship. That first the brothers have Bittul Yesh, and then Yosef elevates it to the level of Bittul B'Mitzius. And so he talks about it there. He talks similar to what you just said, that the Bittul Yesh is in Bia, Bria Yetzira Asiyah. It's nullifying the regular world, my duties, my whatever I need to do. And Bittul B'Mitzius is in Atzilus. So there would be like Chachma and Bina. So there's other examples. The second part, which I took in a different direction entirely, I had to reread the whole thing. And Mamish, it's related to what we talked about music, but I didn't say it the right way. I just explained it as Shir Pashut, Shir Kafun, Shir Mushalash, Shir Merubah, as 4 levels of musical instruments. But what he means is something much more complex. He doesn't, in the mimer there, he didn't mention music, but it's still relevant. This example, there's another example that I'll give two examples. He says the nature of bittul, there are 4 different types of bittul hayesh. Or even in bittul b'mtius, there's 4 different types. And it depends on how much the bittul is able to carry opposites. Because bittul is the highest way that 2 things that are opposite can connect. So the usual way that things connect, what's the usual way that things connect? It's called shituf pula. That I'll do this, you'll do that, and together we make a whole. So that's like in Netzach V'Hod.
Divide and conquer.
Shituf pula. We'll work together.
Yeah.
So neither of us is being nullified. What we're nullified is to the common cause. And that's actually the best type. That's the most inclusive type. Because it can ensure that every person who's contributes everything that he can. And there's no reason for one to really nullify the other because we're nullified to the common cause. Then there's another level, which is the 3-part bittul, that there's a memutza mechaber, that there's something in the middle connecting us. So usually the example for that is that Michal and Gabriel, the minister of water and the minister of fire, they connect in peace together by Hashem, because Hashem is like the intermediate who makes them connect together. How does he make them connect together? He shows them that you actually have something in common with one another. What is that? That really everything is inter-included. So even fire has an element of water in it, and even water has an element of fire. Why? Because we're now talking about ideal elements. We're talking about creations, and creations are always composite. So you see what you see on the outside, but there's also an internal part. So if I tell a husband and a wife, look, you're a male, but you have also femininity in you, and you're feminine, but you have masculinity in you. So they can connect together. That's called inter-inclusion. That's the three part. The middle is what connects them. The middle is really, I didn't say this right, sorry. I mixed them up, sorry. Go back. Gabriel and Michael, they connect just because Hashem is there. And the mashal that's given is the two ministers, and because the king is there, they're both batal to the king, and so they connect together.
Intermediary.
The Chokhmah Bina is like what I just said about it. Each one has an aspect of the other in it.
Scholars.
Yeah, that's his scholars.
That would be the second.
In the mind. And there's Bittul, where everything is just one. It just goes back to being one.
So then what's the fourth?
So those are the four levels.
Wait, so how's the first level?
The first level is...
How is that different from the fourth level?
Because
in the first level, there's only one.
In the fourth level is four things.
Everybody's built to the cause.
Four things, and everybody's built to the cause. And each
So-
one's separate.
Right.
They continue to lead their separate lives. So he says that's the nature of the amud that connects. The nature of the bittul can be one of these four types. So now, instead of saying how I said the music, you can say it a little bit differently, but it's the same idea. That shofar, maybe the chatzot that you mentioned, that's the shir pashut. Everything is just one, just the one simple note. There's no ability to do anything. In the Chokhmah Bina, which is the bittul, the second type of bittul, which is shir kaful, there the bittul is such that really we each have a part of the other in us. So the wind instruments, the idea in the wind instrument is that even as you're blowing out, you can, like when we speak, as we're blowing out, we're stopping the air. So we're playing with both giving sound and refraining from giving sound, blowing and stopping at the same time. So how do wind instruments work? That you blow, and at the same time, you're closing the pipe in different places. So it's like you're connecting the two things together, giving sound and taking sound away. So in the string instruments, you have a middle that's combining the two. So really you're both the two ends of the string, they're what's holding, they're the Michal and Gabriel, but what's important is the middle, which is where you're making the sound. What about the percussion? So the percussion, they don't cancel each other out at all. When you have like a modern drum set, so you've got the cymbals, and you've got the snare, and you've got the bass, and you've got the, what do they call the ones? Tam-tams, I think they call them. The ones that are big in the middle, they're somewhere between a bass and the snare. I guess, what are they called? So usually there's four types. And they don't cancel, there's no connection between them. Really, they're just cooperating together to create the rhythm. So that's the idea there. So this year, for instance, I think we didn't talk about this until now, but somebody sent it to me and it struck me very strongly. This year is Hey Tafshin Pei. And next year, 2021, will be Hey Tafshin Pei Aleph. So that's the holy name of the fourth type of bittul. Hey Shin Taf Pei Aleph. It's almost the same. It's almost the same thing. But so this year is just Hey Tafshin Pei. I talked about it at your Rosh Hashanah table. I don't remember.
No, I don't remember you saying that.
We talked a lot about it. This year is like the beginning of cooperation that's not to nullify any of the participants. They connect because they cooperate because they have a common cause. And really that's considered to be the most complex type of bittul, because nobody is left having to give up something. Really, you just if you find a common cause, and you can say that that was the Rebbe's genius, that he looked for the thing that's the most common cause. It doesn't need you to nullify. And that's the thing with shlichus, that he sends every person somewhere else, and they all together work together to bring Mashiach, because Mashiach is the common cause. And that common cause doesn't require you to nullify yourself to somebody else. It's just do everything you can. He said if there was just one person, what he meant was every person can just do everything that they can. And don't worry about it. It's not running contrary. If you're working on Mashiach, it's a general enough cause that it's not going to run against anything that anybody else is doing. Don't even worry about that it looks like somehow what he's doing is the opposite of what I'm doing. Because it's not like that. Mashiach is so complex. There's so many moving parts. There's so many things to it that everybody can contribute. At the end of the second part, he brings the mashal of the winds. And he says that's how winds work. Winds combine without canceling one another out. Because he says, what do winds do? If a wind is running from northwest to southeast, it's combining all four directions together without canceling any of them. So that's why he brings the example of winds at the end. The final chapter, and he says that the sun also does the same thing. Really, the sun doesn't move from east to west. We know that it moves from northeast to southwest, at least in Eretz Yisrael. It's mostly in the southern side of the sky. The final chapter that he talked about is, when you look at this verse, let's go back to the verse now, he says. And he says, look, there's two things here. Yaval was the tent dweller. Yuval is the one who's doing music. So what do you see from here? Yaval is the bitul ayesh, which comes from a makif. He says the tent dwelling here is a makif. If you don't have a makif, you can't do bitul ayesh. It's not so muvan melav. It's not so how do you say muvan melav?
Not so obvious.
It's not so obvious, but you have to have a makif to do bitul yesh. So it's sort of like it says that when a person gets married, his wife is like his chuma, like the wall around the city. He gives him a makif. Because before he got married, he had no bitul yesh. He thought he had bitul yesh, but he didn't know what bitul yesh was. Halacha is like your wife. Halacha is like something that's feminine, and it gives you a wall around your being. That wall causes bitul yesh. That's yoshev oel umikneh. But Shem achiv Yuval hu haya avi kol tofes kino v'ugav, he says, that is the pnimi. So it's not what you may have thought. I may have thought that the second type of bittul is not felt, but no, it is. That's why I said it's called rapture. And rapture is pretty much the only thing I can come up with in English, because the bittul b'metzius, as much as you would think that this is sending you far, far away, the difference between it and bittul ayesh is that bittul b'metzius has to be felt. The pleasure has to be something that you feel. And that's what the paradox here is, that you're feeling something that's causing you to lose all touch with your reality. That's causing you to lose all your being. So he says there's a makif here and a pnimi. And they have to work together. How do I know that they work together? Because one's called Yaval, the other one's called Yuval. Yaval is the makif, Yuval is the pnimi. Why? Because really there's the same root, Yaval and Yuval. So in the longer mimer, he takes from the Arizal. The Arizal has a whole thing that there's Yaval, Yovel, and Yuval. But because the Arizal was written without Nikud, so there's two different, in the Mefarshim of the Arizal, there's two different explanations how to read this. Is it Yaval, Yovel, Yuval, or is it Yaval, Yuval, Yovel? Which one? Why? The whole thing here is Bina. That's what he says in the end. The whole thing is, we're all talking here about Bina, because Yaval is the infinitive form. It's like the root, the three-letter root.
The Yovel is 50, so it's Bina.
The Yovel itself is not 50, but so we say that it is. It's 48. But the whole thing of Yaval is related to Bina. So first of all, he said something amazing I'd never seen before. The Bina, what's the root of Bina? There's a big argument between the Medaktikim, between the grammarians, what the root is. Is it Bet Nun He or Bet Yud Nun? So if it's Bet Nun He, this doesn't work so well. But if it's Bet Yud Nun, it's amazing. What does Bet Yud Nun mean? Bi Nun. In me is 50. So that's what. So he prefers that. It's true that the other one is also true. It says Vayiven Hashem Elokim et hatzela mikan shebina yetera nitna ba'isha. So everybody who knows anything about diktuk says, here's an example of Chazal mixing up roots. Why? Because Vayiven is from Bet Nun Hey, and Bina is from Bet Yud Nun. Because what is Bina? Bina means to be able to differentiate things. להבחין בין דבר לדבר, מבין דבר מתוך דבר. So it's having two things. I know the difference between them, and I begin to think about them. So, in any case, the being is certain, but according to Chazal, they're very related, these two roots. So the grammarians, the early grammarians, had a whole dispute. Which is it? Is it Bina? Is it from Bet Yud Nun or Bet Nun He? In any case, if it's Bet Yud Nun, which most modern grammarians would say, so it just means Binun. I have in me 50. So it's mamish a beautiful explanation for where the 50 gates of Bina come from. I never thought of that. It was such a simple thing in front of my eyes all the years. And I didn't see it until I looked in the Arizal because the Alter Rebbe sent me there. So now the question becomes, how do you read this? Yaval, Yuval, Yovel, or Yaval, Yovel, Yuval? What would be the... Yaval is definitely the infinitive. That's the Makif. Everybody agrees. That's the first one. Now the Yovel and Yuval is a question of which is which. Both of them mean the same thing. Lehovil, they both mean to draw something in a certain direction.
The vav.
The question is...
The addition of the vav is hamshach.
Yeah, is the hamshach. So the Arizal says there, but you can't make up your mind. He says it's written in such a way, it's almost like the Rechu wrote it in such a way that you wouldn't be able to decide which is which. It's almost like on purpose. I still have to think about this. But he writes that there's the Yovel with a cholam, and the Yuval has a mlapum, they used to call it. We call it a kubutz, or we call it it's not a shuruk. Shuruk is usually the three dots.
With the dot in the middle.
But the dot in the middle is a mlapum. That's the real name. Mlapum, to fill your mouth with a point. What's the difference? It says very simply. When it's a cholam, that's the bina in the mind, because it's above the vav. So it's how the bina is in the intellect. When it's inside the vav, so that's the midos. That's the bina coming down. So Yuval, whether you read it, afterward there's Tuval Kain, who's also related. There's no Yovel, we don't see a Yovel. So it would seem that Yovel, when the Torah talks about Jubilee, Yovel, that's in the intellect. And Yuval would be how it is in the heart, how the bina comes down to the heart. So that would be the sense of bittul inside the person's heart. So that's what this article is about.
Well, different mind.
Different mind altogether. Some of the pieces were there, but until I saw this is Shonais the Shabbos, it didn't fit.
So when Shana Rabbah, they're Chabad's makbid on who at ho.
Again.
Everybody else is ho.
People say ho.
Every other.